Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about Brandin Cooks versus Will Fuller. This is the second or third video, I believe, in the ADP battle series, where I go ahead and find guys going around similar areas in your fantasy football draft, and then discussing which player would I prefer. In this case, we've got Brandin Cooks versus Will Fuller. I have done a video of Terry McLaurin versus Devontae Parker as well, if you guys want to check that out after this. So obviously, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm trying to find guys that are going in similar spots of your draft, and Brandin Cooks and Will Fuller, while teammates, are going back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 in your 2020 fantasy football drafts. Right now, according to ESPN and Yahoo's ADP, I found wide receiver number 36 for Brandin Cooks and wide receiver number 35 for Will Fuller. On the other website, it was actually reversed. One was 35, the other one was 36, so they are going right next to each other back-to-back, like I said, and I think this is a very interesting matchup to look at, because it's going to be pretty much near impossible to get both of these guys, so you're really going to have to go ahead and make the correct decision come draft day on the Houston receiver. So before we get into the video, I'd like to ask you guys, could please go down below and click that subscribe button. It's free, and I produce content every single day to help you guys win your 2020 fantasy football championship. So without further ado, check out the draft guide as well down below. Let's get right into the video. Brandin Cooks versus Will Fuller III. We'll start off the video talking about the new man in Houston. Obviously, they traded for Brandin Cooks from the LA Rams. Brandin Cooks gets passed around more than that one girl that you knew in high school, because Brandin Cooks has been on a zillion teams. He did it in the New Orleans Saints uniform. He's done it in a New England Patriots uniform. He's been in a Rams uniform, and now he is in a Houston Texans uniform for the Houston Texans, because Bill O'Brien decided to bring him in after I think this was after he let go of DeAndre Hopkins, because, you know, why give up your best wide receiver and one of the best wide receivers in the NFL right now? You know, why would you need one of those guys, you know? So Brandin Cooks right now could be the wide receiver number one, and that's really going to be the primary topic of this video. Who is going to be getting more targets, more volume? Will it be Will Fuller or will it be Brandin Cooks? Because that's really how you determine who you want to fucking draft, the guy who's going to get more volume. So right now on FFPC, he is going as the 97th player overall in the draft. FFPC is a high-stakes fantasy football website, so it takes the average draft position from there. The 97.85th pick off the board is Brandin Cooks, obviously now a Houston Texan, 5'10", 189 pounds, 26.8 years old, so still pretty young for being on a zillion teams in the NFL. This guy is fast as fuck. Spoiler alert, so is Will Fuller. 4.33 40-yard dash, 99th percentile, 77th percentile speed score, 50th percentile burst score, 99th percentile agility score, and an 84th percentile catch radius. His best comparable player is T.Y. Hilton. Don't really put too much weight into the guy's best comparable player, but that is something interesting to note if you want to look more into it. So Brandin Cook right now coming off the board is wide receiver number 36 and pick 89. His ADP is obviously going to be different between obviously all of the websites. That's more of a high stakes league. This is based off of ESPN and Yahoo, which are more normal leagues, but I still like to look at both of their average draft positions. So wide receiver number 61 last season, playing in 14 games. He did not have all that hot of a season, but it was okay because it was really just an injury-riddled season where the Rams really just took a shit. The Rams were looked at just like the Bears last season, one of these juggernaut teams, a team that's going to be hard to beat, and they took a Super Bowl nap like you've never seen before. They're in the Super Bowl, they get smacked up by Bill Belichick, and then Sean McVay falls asleep, and then Brandin Cooks just really doesn't have that good of a season. They commit to the two tight end set. Brandin Cooks just isn't doing shit, but now obviously the Rams are on a whole different path without Brandin Cooks, but Brandin Cooks obviously lands in Houston. 8.4 PPR points per game, ranked 67th at the wide receiver position when he was on the Rams. 72 targets, 5.1 per game, ranked 55th at wide receiver. 42 receptions, 3.0 per game, ranking 61st at the wide receiver position. He had 583 receiving yards, 41.6 per game, ranking 57th at wide receiver. 2 total touchdowns, ranking 75th amongst wide receivers, and 3 red zone receptions, 73rd amongst wide receivers. Now, I don't necessarily buy super duper 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 Hooper, Austin Hooper, much into these stats because, you know, he was on a different team. Now he's on Houston. He goes from LA to Houston. He was productive, actually, not last season. Obviously, he didn't look too good, but the season before in LA, he was pretty productive. So you would think that maybe he will have a better season in 2020. Considering he is going to a team that is going to be very pass-heavy, in my opinion, in 2020. I really think the Houston Texans are going to try to run the ball with David Johnson, but they're obviously still going to want to be passing the ball with Deshaun Watson like we've seen in the past. So looking at his efficiency numbers, this is something I also find very important to identify, is how efficient of a wide receiver really was Brandin Cooks last season. While the sample size isn't the greatest because he's kind of playing hurt, he's playing like shit. This guy, the one thing to worry about Brandin Cooks, the biggest worry, is this motherfucker is one concussion off of being out of the NFL, but I will talk about that next. So his yards per reception was 13.9, ranking 38th at the wide receiver position. So he is kind of a deeper down the field threat. Yards per target, 8.1, 49th at the wide receiver position. He didn't really have all that many good catchable target rate, which I think is important because Jared Goff kind of took a step down last year, and when he gets the improved quarterback in Deshaun Watson, his numbers will go up. Only 48 of his targets were actually deemed catchable by playerprofiler.com, ranking 96th at the wide receiver position. His target quality rating was also in the dumpsters, like he was with that rat from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, ranking 78th at the wide receiver position. His catch rate was not very good, but his true catch rate, so his normal catch rate is 58.3, ranking 74th at wide receiver. That's shit. You want to throw that guy in the dumpster. But no, his true catch rate, 87.5, ranking 21st at wide receiver. So it's very important to note the distinction between catch rate and true catch rate. If this guy was getting balls thrown anywhere actually near him, he would have been being one of those more elite pass catchers, not even an elite pass catcher, but a great pass catcher in the NFL. His total target distance, which is also known as air yards, 1,018, ranked 40th at the wide receiver position. Obviously, again, something important to note is the average target distance is 14.1, ranking 18th at wide receiver, which is very good, obviously, for Mr. Brandin Cooks, and his drop rate was very low with a 5.6 percentage. So even with the injury-riddled season and his kind of topsy-turviness of playing in the LA Rams system, I think that Brandin Cooks probably would have had a much better season had he not have gotten hurt, and had they not have played, the team just was kind of on a down low, and then towards the end of the season, they really started rising and looking very good again, but it was a little too late for Brandin Cooks. I think Brandin Cooks has a huge bounce-back year this season in 2020. I see him being one of those guys in the later rounds who is going to be very hard to avoid, but same thing goes with his teammates. That's why we have to analyze both guys, and at the end of the video I will give you my verdict. So if you guys have enjoyed thus far, please make sure to smack that subscribe button down below. I would really appreciate that. I make content every day for all of you motherfuckers. So looking at his injury proneness kind of rating on player profile, his injury probability 61.7%, not very good. Fragility rating 66.1, not very good, but he's not as injury prone as Will Fuller. He's only had 2 concussions so far in his NFL career. Psych, I fucking read that wrong. He's had 4 concussions in his NFL career, so that's why I was talking about earlier. This guy gets hit in the head, he gets flicked in the ear one more time, and the guy's out forever, and I don't want to see that happen to a guy like Brandin Cooks, who I think is a talented player, so that's obviously something you have to take into account. His face on there is red. I don't know if you can tell. I don't know if it's super bright red. On my screen, it is. It's like in UFC, when someone's literally just punching you in the face repeatedly, and it shows that your face is red because you're getting beaten down. That's what Brandin Cooks' face is like, because the helmet-to-helmet for him is it just doesn't work out well for Brandin Cooks in his favor, but I do think that he's actually less injury riddled than a guy like Mr. Will Fuller. So getting into Will Fuller, FFPC ADP is actually going a bit earlier on FFPC as pick 85.46, pretty much like 9-10 picks higher than Brandin Cooks, but in most drafts I see them going around the same round. Houston Texans, 6 foot tall, 186 pounds, 26.3 years old, just like I said earlier. Him and Brandin Cooks are both fast as fuck. I'd love to see one of those training camp videos of them just running against each other, having a race, so you can just jizz in your pants to whoever runs faster and just end up drafting them, because too many people put so much weight into those training camp videos. 4.32 40-yard dash, ranking in the 99th percentile for wide receivers, 83rd percentile speed score, 43rd percentile burst score, 53rd percentile agility score, and a 43rd percentile catch radius for big man Will Fuller. Like I said at the beginning of the video, Will Fuller coming off the board as wide receiver number 35. Pick number 86, so according to the ADP, he is the 1 pick higher than Mr. Brandin Cooks. Obviously, both teammates, like I've said a zillion times. Wide receiver number 53 last season, playing an injury-riddled season. But for Will Fuller, an injury-riddled season is the normal. This motherfucker misses games left and right. He just cannot stay healthy. He finds that home inside of that blue injury tent that they put you in on the sideline. He knows the nurses well in the local Houston hospital because he's just there all the time. He's just chatting with them, flirting it up there with the people over there. 12.2 PPR points per game, ranking 37th at the wide receiver position last season. 71 targets, 6.5 per game, 59th at wide receiver. 49 receptions, 4.5 per game, ranking 47th at wide receiver. He had 670 total receiving yards, 69.0 per game. Very nice, ranking 47th at wide receiver. 3 total tutties, 59th amongst wide receivers, and 4 red zone receptions, 60th amongst wide receivers. None of these guys that we've talked about so far are really those big ball hawks in the end zone like we saw out of Will Fuller's old teammate, DeAndre Hopkins. So Will Fuller's efficiency also is actually pretty good. Both these guys are relatively efficient wide receivers, but obviously Will Fuller has been dealing with a better quarterback the last couple of years than Brandin Cooks has, because Jared Goff just isn't necessarily that great of a quarterback in my opinion. But in the past, obviously Cooks has done it with Drew Brees and Tom Brady. So 13.7 yards per reception, 43rd at wide receiver, 9.4 yards per target, 18th at wide receiver. Both of these guys were pretty tall, or not pretty tall, they're pretty high up in the average target distance efficiency rating, 14.8 average target distance, ranking 12th at the wide receiver position. Will Fuller also not really one of those guys that's going to be dropping the ball a big amount, just like with Brandin Cooks. Drop rate only 8.5%. His true catch rate, just like with Brandin Cooks, is very good, ranking 28th at the wide receiver position. So these guys are kind of close in how they, not necessarily how they play, even though they do kind of play kind of similar, but how they play on a per-game basis. So, looking at the injury, this is what really seals the deal for me, is the injury rating. Injury probability 63.5, fragility rating 80.0. Now, we saw Will Fuller has, he's got red everywhere. His legs, his head, his shoulders, knees and toes type of deal are red. He's got the shoulder that's red. His stomach is red. His one leg is red. His other leg is red. Not very good for Mr. Will Fuller. This guy's pretty fucking injury prone, if I say so myself. Brandin Cooks, on the other hand, he just gets hit in the head a little too much. This guy gets hit all over the place. So I am very worried about both of them when it comes to an injury rating, but I am more concerned about Will Fuller. So my verdict, drum roll please. Bang! It is Mr. Brandin Cooks. I feel like he's less likely to get hurt, which is something that's big for me. I try not to draft guys that I feel like are Brandin Cooks is kind of one shot away from just being absolutely deceased. Like, I'm being genuinely honest with you. He could fucking die on the field. But Will Fuller's one freak in the shower falling accident from being in the hospital again for a zillion fucking years. So, I also want to talk about how Brandin Cooks has been that 100 target guy in the NFL. He's had 5 out of his 7 years in the NFL with those 100 plus targets, and the only years he actually missed this was the years that he had missed multiple games, like last season, and I believe his first season in the NFL where he missed a couple of games. But even though this guy's getting concussed, the big bonus of Brandin Cooks is that motherfucker just somehow, I don't know what he does, what the NFL doctors do, but he just flies straight back into the game, and he's just perfectly fine in the next game. So with that said, Brandin Cooks is my pick. I think he's a safer type of pick. I think that Will Fuller is one of those picks where you're just gutty, you throw him out one week and he either balls out or shits the bed. I think we're to see Brandin Cooks perform on a more consistent basis week in and week out for the Houston Texans. So that's why I like him more for fantasy football in 2020. Let me know what you guys feel about Will Fuller versus Brandin Cooks. I could see other people trying to chase that upside in the middle of the draft and go for Will Fuller, but I try not to draft guys that I think are just going to put up like 1 or 2 points every couple of weeks, because that's really going to hurt your team, whereas Brandin Cooks is going to keep you around that safe area. While you want to take shots in the draft, I think you want to take it a little bit later than where these guys go in like the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th rounds, when you really want to start hammering out these super duper high upside boom or bust wide receivers. So thank you all for watching. I love each and every single one of you motherfuckers. Make sure if you enjoyed to please slap that subscribe button, probably on your screen, also down below. Check out the draft guide. Hopefully you guys didn't mind that my camera quality is probably a little worse. I'm on my dad's laptop because my laptop had to get shipped off to Dell because it's a piece of shit and they have to fix it. But I love you all. Have a great rest of your guys' day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with yet another heater of video. Good boy.